All right, it looks like child-abusing socialist Raphael Warnock, who's one freaky character if you know anything about him, probably won in Georgia, and honk honk, of course, there were no irregularities, and everything's above board and perfect. And the MSM stresses that very much, and I'm sure that YouTube will too very soon when it's inevitably certified. So it looks like the Democrats will have a Senate tie, possibly, which means that with Joe Manchin's existence, there will be some constraint on what they can do, but Kamala will be glad to go in there and wield her cudgel. She'll do it gladly because she wants to be the big boy, and you know she wants to be the president, the asterisk president, just so that we're aware. That is her ambition. She wants to be basically, she's like Hillary Clinton. She's a cutthroat, grifter, an opportunist. But anyway, it's funny to watch the neocons in the GOP, like the Lincoln Project morons. They're not really... They're Republicans in the partisan sense of wanting to make money, which is typically what Republicans want, sort of like the Democrats, of course. And the MSM are very quick. They probably had these stories pre-written. They're like, well, Trump's divisiveness has cost the Republicans the control of the Senate. You're going to have House Minority Leader Mitch McConnell and stuff like that. I'm thinking to myself, which one is more likely? You fucked up in Georgia because the party refused to fully get behind candidates because of the fact that they backed Trump. Or it's Trump's fault despite massive in-party popularity, massive drive and turnout, and this is undisputed even by the lamestream in the prior election. He got more votes objectively than any incumbent president has ever gotten, by a huge margin. Won 8 of 9 bellwethers, if I remember correctly, and more counties than almost anybody who has managed to honk lose in a fair election, at least. That he's responsible. No, he's not. No, it's the neocons' fault. They've been mismanaging the party, the Republican Party, for a very long time. As soon as Ronald Reagan was no longer in office, the Republicans started sucking. They thought, well, Herbert Walker, he sort of got it, and he wins, and he fails. Clinton comes fourth. By and large, the neocon Republicans don't do anything. The handful that did are treated as embarrassments and all sided with Trump, like Gingrich and stuff like that. The handful of people that at least made some sort of legislative attempt as a stopgap against Bill Clinton. Bush comes along. He's a chucklehead, a goddamn embarrassment. Barely wins re-election against a dude who couldn't debate his way out of a paper bag. Obama comes along, erases, well, this is not a bad thing, some of what Bush did, unfortunately retains the rest, especially the surveillance and the drone strikes, especially the warmongering. And the rest is history. All throughout that paradigm, the Republicans have gravitated towards being embarrassments. And by the way, what you're about to see is that they are going to attempt to use this as carte blanche through the MSM, because the neocons, they're friends of the MSM too. They have the same ties that the Democrats do by and large. They party with the same people. They snort coke together. Don't think of it as a partisan thing. They're going to try to cast it off as that, though. They're going to tell you that the MAGA people ruined their election, and now the Democrats will run roughshod over everyone, and we can't have this MAGA shit anymore. We have to go back to the Bush business as normal, because the Patriot Party, MAGA types, they don't care about the Republican Party or about you. They're just opportunists. It'll be projection. But the MSM will very, very helpfully try to inculcate that in people's minds. That it was Trump's fault, or the fault of the candidates for backing him for the presumptive loss. And again, keep in mind, the election's perfectly and totally fair. Totally above board. It's totally squeaky clean. Nothing untoward could have possibly happened. After all, we know that elections are absolutely perfect, except the 2016 election. The MSM told me that for 4 years. So you know that it's true, and multi-billionaires are parroting it over and over. They're going to ascribe the Senate loss to someone who doesn't even disavow communism, refuse to answer that question. They're going to ascribe that to Trump. It'll fail by and large, because individuals who are not medicated will look at the situation and say, if they know anything about politics. And I think the MAGA people are a bit more keyed in than the neocons. The neocons, they see an R after the name, and as long as Fox News tells them that it's an okay R after the name, they'll vote for them. Otherwise, they'll avoid it and call it liberal or something, or evil and extremist. Republicans are cowards by and large, but the MAGA folks aren't. I think they'll look at it and say, well, again, which one is more likely? The dude with more popularity than Reagan sank their chances by latching onto the race, or it was the party's fault for not getting behind things and not putting its house into order. The Republican Party's leadership right now, with the exception of Trump and his inner circle, people like Cruz or Rand, Mitch McConnell is oblivious. Mitch McConnell, by the way, do you think for a moment Mitch McConnell or any of the other mainline GOP loyal, the neocons of the 90s and 2000s, do you think they care about the Senate balance? No, they play people who care on TV for the benefit of getting voted for. At the end of the day, all of these people do the same thing in fundraising. It doesn't matter to Mitch whether he's minority or majority leader. It doesn't matter to him how many Democrats or Republicans are there. It is a de facto one-party system split in two artificially for the purposes of fooling people. For once, in the last few years, we've finally seen that we have individuals, both on the far left, which I would never vote for economic reasons, if not principles related to ethics, and people who are populistic on the right, people like Donald Trump and his ilk. We've seen people who are different from the establishment. They operate differently, they give different ideas about how to do things. Some of them, I believe, are authentic in their beliefs. Some of them, like people like AOC, are just grifters. But there are ideas that are outside of the establishment. The establishment has begun to fight back. Right now, we're living in the Empire Strikes Back. That's basically what it boils down to. But as I've always said to people, it's always darkest before dawn. The time to flip out, throw the baby out with the bathwater and get so demoralized you fucking noose yourself or something is definitely not now. See, if the enemy can demoralize you and keep you from fighting, then they've won already. So keeping that in mind, that's not what the MAGA folks are doing. They've decided that they're not going to put down their banners. They've decided, no, we're not going to go anywhere. We're not going to mindlessly fall in behind neocons because it's not the point. The whole point was the reason why there was a Trump revolution in the first place was a reaction to those neocons never standing up for anything. That's the whole point. The reason why the far left is rising right now, it's not because the Democrats are doing a good job and care about American workers or the working class or the poor. Hell, if they did, or standing against war, standing against some abstract corruption, if they were doing a good job, you wouldn't see this. This always happens. I've been saying it since the 2012 era when Ron Paul was shafted. The GOP made a mistake, and they were they were going to get fucked. And they have. Now their reckoning has come. Trump is not splitting their party up. He's the scapegoat for a schism that already existed years before he ran. It was already there. The seeds were sown in 2008. Technically before that, they were sown in the Bush era. Technically speaking, what you're seeing now is the culmination of the end of the post-Reagan paradigm, when a GOP that originally had principles abandoned them in favor of multinational corporatism. The Democrats realized that was a winning strategy as long as they had someone more ably spoken than Herbert Walker, which isn't exactly difficult, and so they put Clinton in there. Younger, rhetorically very brilliant, at least at the time. Now he looks like a zombie. He's out to lunch. That's what they did. They took Reagan out of Reaganism, they slapped a D on it, and added a bit more welfare, and that was liberalism now. And it's worked up until now. Now, because it's clearly not working for the average person, and it hasn't achieved the promises. The globalist trade deals and so forth were supposed to make jobs, lower prices, bring wealth flowing through the streets of the United States, and none of these things happened. If anything, it fucked everything up. The only thing holding the whole thing together was the expansion of the net and the fact that the internet became such a hegemonic and dominating part of society and economics, and it was all US based. That's the only thing holding things together right now, and the politicians are so dumb they won't even safeguard the net from attacks, both from within and without. That's the problem. Yeah, the MAGA folks are not going away. No, Trump's not to blame for this. The only people to blame for this are the GOP at large. And by the way, and I've said this, Trump's not a long-term Republican loyalist. He doesn't care if he's a Dem or a Republican. His ideas are closer to 90s Democrats. Or arguably like a Ronald Reagan, but Ronald Reagan, if he were alive today, wouldn't even recognize the GOP. He might recognize Trump as vaguely kindred. He'd probably hang out with Rand Paul. He was friendly with Ron Paul. He probably wouldn't have a huge problem with maybe like a Cruz or a Crenshaw, but by and large, he wouldn't recognize the GOP, the Dems, or anyone else. He'd say, oh, I guess I was right about these socialists infiltrating everything. Why doesn't the GOP have any fucking balls? They don't. Trump does. A handful of others. That's about it. And the unifying feature is none of them are establishment Republicans. They're the people that they have to lead the party. Mitch McConnell's not. All the Boehners of yesteryear, they're all a bunch of boring morons. They don't drive turnout. Their idea of a campaign is having some Pepperidge Farm cookies and sitting there and talking into a teleprompter. They're boring. Nobody wants to watch that shit unless they're over 50. That's about all. Peace out.